Hey everybody, this is Danny with Insane in the Brine. Check us out at insaneinthebrine.com. That's where you will find all my recipes for making kimchi, sauerkraut, pickles, you name it. I have several different kimchi recipes there, and there you will find my cubed Korean radish recipe, or Kkakdugi. I also put a recipe up here, which is probably very similar but not identical. And the thing is that, whenever I make it, if I'm just making it for myself, I'm not really following a recipe. I'm just kind of putting in what I have around. And you'll see some of that in this video, what ends up going into it. So the recipe should just be kind of a template for you, and you can experiment from there. I'm going to show you today the whole process of growing this from seed all the way to harvesting them and then turning them into my kimchi. So if you can't do all of that, that's okay. You still can see the process of making the Kkakdugi in just a little bit. And in the meantime, as far as growing them, I'm here in the Georgia, around the Atlanta area, which is region 7B. And, we have very hot summers and a pretty cold winter. So I'm looking for that timing where I can plant them, still have around the 4 months needed for them to really mature into the size that they can grow into. A little red radish that we're used to seeing here, you can grow them like in a month, but these take a lot longer. Ideally, you have like 3 or 4 months to grow them. And so you want to do the timing just right, because you really don't want them in the garden past like January. Just starts to get too cold, at least around here. Is to start growing them like in September, and it's still very hot here. So I just create a shade barrier in my garden plot for where they're going to be, and on a more mild day I'll expose them to more sunlight. But if it's a real scorching day, which in Georgia we definitely can have that in September, then I tend to give them a lot more shade and water them, and they are more, as a seedling they can be pretty sensitive, and one harsh day without any shade covering could be the end of them. So I plant quite a few, and I pull back just to those that are really hardy, and I have really good luck with them, and I've been growing them for years. And it's hard to find the seeds here. You can't just find the seeds at any old place like Lowe's or Home Depot, where they usually have so many seeds. So you can get them on Amazon or eBay, or probably other specialty online retailers. So I'll provide a link in the comments if you're looking for some seeds. I can give the link to what I buy, and I've had such great luck with them. They're really high quality, and I have a really high germination rate, and I just love them. So that link will be found there. And if you can't grow them from seed, if you either can't find the seeds or you don't have the right growing environment for doing that, if you have an international grocery store around you, odds are you'll be able to find Korean radishes, or you already know you have access to them, and that's why you're here, is to learn how to make the kimchi part. Just keep watching and you'll see my process. Another option is, if you cannot access any Korean radish, is to settle for some daikon, which is pretty similar. It's a large white radish, and once you're done with the whole recipe, using them just as a substitute for Korean radish, you may not even be able to tell the difference. There is a difference in the flavor, but it's not major, and you'll probably like it just as much. So that's a good substitute. Now, one other thing to consider for growing them is you could do a late winter, early spring crop. In my region, again, 7B, you could do like a planting in late February, mid or late February. In my case, I don't always do that, but the seedlings, they do sprout up then. It doesn't get too cold for them, even though it still freezes at that time. You could start them inside and then transfer them and give them a little tent covering to keep them warm on if there's like a unusually harsh day. But basically they do it, and by the time we get into April and May, it's getting really hot already, then they can start to bolt. So you want to have them sort of picked before, a little bit just before that point. So because of the shorter growing season and the fact that it's getting kind of too hot for them, whereas when you do it in the fall, the really cold winter actually sweetens them up. So if they make it through a few freezes, that's really good. But when you're growing them in the late, in the early spring, you're not going to have that benefit at the end there of some freezes. You could even throw them in a bucket of ice water when you harvest them. I like to do that even regardless of when I harvest them, if it's in winter or if it's in the spring crop. But that kind of helps the flavor out too, and it helps firm them up as well. So throwing everything in an ice bucket of water for a couple hours is something I tend to do anyway with vegetables I'm about to ferment. Just get them real nice and crispy. And once you've harvested them and taken them out of the ground, they're a root vegetable on some level, so they're gonna be real nice and dirty and lots of roots dangling from them. So you're just gonna want to rinse everything off real well and trim them, cut off the roots. You can cut the tops off and give them, I like to give them a scrubbing with a bristle brush, a clean one that I don't use for dishes or anything. I just use it for veggies. And then it's up to you if you want to peel them or not. I tend to give a little bit of peeling, which you'll also see here. Well, as you can see here, the radish is just really beautiful. Got one really large one, but they all just look great. It's interesting how different they can be as far as the shape goes, like this one you see. But we're going to just peel them all first here and then chop off the tops, and that way we can get the net weight of what we're actually going to use to figure out our salt. See here, we're just going to go ahead and peel around each of them. I'm not going to go super deep on them. They were really clean anyway. Yeah, see that? Alright, so you've got that complete. They look great. Now the idea with dicing them is, you can go with a smaller or larger piece. You've got to kind of decide what works best for you, what you want. Lately I've been liking a little bit larger dice, maybe about 3/4 of an inch, but I used to go with like a 1/2 inch quite a bit. So that's up to you. Let's go ahead and try a little thicker cut. Get it about there. Try to repeat that. Don't need a ruler or anything. Just got to eyeball it. Do one more. All right, now we've got these nice discs, and from there we can dice our pieces. You can do, you can stack them and do it a few at a time. It would be quicker. I kind of like to do one at a time, so I'm going to show you that. So you're going to kind of try to visualize how big you want it. Do you want them this big? You're going to go this far, you're going to end up with larger cubes. Like I said, I'm going to go with the larger this time, but you can do smaller. It's up to you. Kind of what you have in mind, how you envision you want it. Yes, this is a nice kind of size. Right here you got. Here we go, we got the first one done. We're going to go ahead and set that in our bowl and just keep going until they're all done. For these smaller ones, you could do the 2 slices, but I generally just do one and then one, do the X, and then they're going to be triangular shape, but it's kind of a nice size. And with this thin one, I'm just going to cut this in half. Some of these just right in half. All right, so we've got this whole bowl filled up, and I could put it on the scale, but we would get the weight of the bowl in there, and we just want the weight of the radishes. So we're going to deal with that now. We're going to put these into a new bowl. So we can just take a cheap gram scale like this, put on a new bowl. There's a button called Tare, T-A-R-E, which means eliminate the weight that you've put on there, which I've just done. You can see there, it's at 0. The unit's been set to grams, so let's see how much this comes to. You can see there, 1,428 grams, maybe 29. And there's a lot of different ways you can do the salting. You can do a lot of salt. You can do at least 10% salt by weight and be rinsing this. But I like to just take the weight of the radish, give it 2.5% salt, and not worry about the other stuff, the garlic or the green onion or any of the other things that add to the weight. But just take 2.5% of this, and we'll never need to rinse it. The salt level is going to be perfect for me. And I think a lot of people tend to hover around that 2.5% and are happy with the results. So let's figure out the math for that. 2.5%, let's round up to 1430. That is 35.75 grams. Let's call it 36 grams. I know because I just asked Alexa. So what we could do here is just hit tare again and just get the number to 36, and that means we've added 36 grams to the weight. So we'll do that now. All right, so here we go, 36 grams, which by the way is right about 2 tablespoons. So you figure 1 tablespoon has about 18 or 19 grams of salt on average. We can verify that in a minute. Up to 31, 33, 35, probably close enough. 36, there we go. All right, so you can see that's a generous amount of salt. We're going to move things around with our hands just to get it evenly coated on everything. All right, just going to use my fingers. Got my gloves on, so it's not going to hurt my fingers. It's always good to avoid that. Just trying to make sure the salt gets on everything, so you want to try to reach it down to the very bottom, and that's going to be good enough. And I'm not going to do much more at all today. I'm going to cover this with saran wrap, put it in my refrigerator, let it sit overnight. We'll finish this tomorrow. Now we could just leave this out. The point of waiting now is to allow all of the juice inside of it, the moisture, the liquid, to extract out. We're going to use that later in the step to make the paste. But I like to do that in the fridge just because I don't really feel like getting fermentation real active at this point, and I don't want this to come into contact with anything. You know, I mean, as far as I know, my house is free of bugs and any issues, but I like to put it away for the night and resume it the next day. So, you know, as I said before, a popular rule of thumb is a tablespoon of salt's got about anywhere from 16 to 20 grams. Frequently it's cited as 18, so just out of curiosity I wanted to see what mine comes up as. This is 1 flat tablespoon. 19, look at that. So if you want to, if you don't have the scale and you're not sure how much you're working with, you can always gauge. A tablespoon is going to be somewhere in there, and we don't have to be supremely precise about this. Some people may disagree with that, but when it comes to lacto fermentation, there's a wide range of salinity that we can use and still have very good results, you know, as low as even a little below 1% all the way to above 5%. So we know we're going to be hovering right around 3%. There's really no concern there. So just wanted to point that out. Now, if you want to know the weight of your radishes, you know, in the store, you can weigh them. I think there's usually a scale that tells you either pounds or kilograms, and of course a pound is right at around 450 grams. So you figure, you know, if you have, let's say, 2 pounds of radishes, then you've got about 907 grams. So you might be able to figure out your grams in the store if you're not sure. And over time, I think you'll know a lot of this just by feel, by looking at it. You'll kind of know how much to use, and you can always just taste it as well. And if it tastes good and salty but not too salty, that's fine too. That's, you know, in ancient times, people didn't have the exact weighing machinery that we do today, and you could really do this by what tastes good to you, and that will be fine as well. Well, you can see about 24 hours later, and you can see a lot of that moisture has been pulled from the radishes using that salt. And we're going to move that liquid into a separate container. And there may be better ways than this, but I just like to use my hands. I got some gloves on, but they're not totally necessary if you're just making this for yourself. I just hold everything there while I get all the liquid out. Might have a few plop in, but that's okay, not a problem. And I like using this container just so I can see how much brine I end up with. That I'm going to use to base how much of the pepper flakes I use for my paste. You can see here I've got about 1 cup of the liquid that was extracted from the radishes. They were really juicy. I grew them myself, and I had just picked them. So that's more than I normally get, and I probably don't need a whole cup of pepper flakes. I don't necessarily even need to use the whole cup of this. I'm probably going to use 3/4 of it, and then half a cup of the pepper flakes. That way I have a little bit more on the liquid side, so it's a wetter kind of a paste. If you like it really thick, then you can go half and half, equal parts. So it could be, if I use 3/4 of this, 3/4 of a cup of the pepper flakes, that'll give me a thicker paste. And because there's more peppers, it's going to be a little hotter too. I'm not really worried about the heat part because I'm going to be adding this habanero to the mix, which is going to amp it up heat-wise to just where I like it. For the paste, I like breaking out my Ninja blender. There's a set of large, medium, and small. It's not super powerful, this set, but for making pastes, it's a little bit like a food processor, and I just love using it. It's really convenient. I don't have to break out my Vitamix. So now we'll just see each step of the way what I'm going to add to make our paste for the Kkakdugi. So like I said, I used 3/4 of the cup of that liquid. If I need to add the rest in the end because I just don't feel like I have enough or it's too thick, then I can always keep this. It'll be in reserve. For now, I'm just going to just start with 3/4 of a cup. Okay, sliced up that habanero, just make that a little easier. A bunch of garlic. I was going to do a whole head of garlic for this. I think it was about 3 pounds of radish. So I wanted quite a bit to really get the flavor in there, but they were just such big cloves, so I think 8 or 9 of those are going to do it. For the ginger, I already keep my own fermented ginger paste from all this ginger I grew. It's salted and it's already fermenting, so we know it's going to help initiate fermentation. I'm going to use a tablespoon of that. But if you're starting from whole ginger root, then you can just grate it beforehand or even slice it, because if you're going to blend this, that's going to take care of the rest. As far as the skin, it's up to you whether or not to remove it. Of course, the skin can get a little tough and fibery, so you might want to remove it beforehand. Good little trick is use like a grapefruit spoon, the scrapey edge, and just scrape that peel off. That makes it super easy. As far as how much garlic and ginger to use or extra hot stuff, it's totally up to you. If you don't like really strong, pungent flavors, I mean, you might not like kimchi in the first place, but you can go a little, lower on the garlic if you want a few cloves just to get the flavor in there a little bit. I tend to like to go on the heavy side, but not as heavy as some go. So you can sort of decide what you like. All right, this is going to be my half a cup of Korean red pepper flakes, gochugaru. Next very common ingredient will be either fish sauce. This is a Vietnamese one, but it's very good quality. Tastes really great. Strong umami flavor. So a fish sauce. It came literally just from salt and fish. That's all. There's no sugar or anything in it. Or the salt shrimp is another popular option. Or you could use a combination. And I think I'm going to go with the salt shrimp in this case. I don't often get to find it around where I am, but in this case I've got it, so I'm going to use it. I don't personally love a really strong flavor of this. Some people do, and it's typical to use more than I do, but I'm going to put in probably just a couple tablespoons. Here we have 1 and 2. Now if you're a vegan and you don't eat any fish products or animal products at all, then there's so many other options, kelp powder, mushroom powder, to get that umami flavor. Soy sauce, you're going to want to go with an organic option that doesn't have any preservatives or additives in it that could mess up fermentation. Tamari, same thing, same idea with the organic. Liquid aminos or coconut aminos, those all have a great savory flavor that don't have any animal product in them. Again, just look for organic and additive free. Now it could be as simple as this for our paste, and by the way, you can mix this by hand. It doesn't need to be in a blender, but you'd have to really put the garlic through a mincer and really shred that ginger and then cut it finely. I did that for a long time, but this is just a lot quicker and easier. And this could be it. This is the most just simple, straightforward base for the paste right here, but sometimes it's fun to add something else like some onion or some fruit. I just looked in the fridge. Sometimes I just look for stuff that I need to use up. Like this is an older looking orange, but I know the juice inside's really delicious because I had some recently. I have this old pear, Korean, Asian pear is something that can be added to kimchi. It makes it a little bit pastier, but I mean, I need to use this up. I know they're delicious. They're really sweet. So I'm going to go ahead and put the juice of the orange in and the pear in. We'll take a look at what that gives us. You can see, and it's a really beautiful fruit in there. These sugars are just going to help stimulate the ferment more, feed the bacteria, which is going to create more carbonation, make that nice fizzy kimchi. So I say let's do it. Well, that gave us a fair amount of juice. I mean, that would be 2 or 3 tablespoons right there. I took off most of the peel on this just because I've had it around a while. I'm just going to plop the whole thing in there. It's going to get mashed into that paste just fine. And here we go. Alright, so then I'll blitz that for about a minute or so. Take a look. It looks real nice and smooth. It is ready to go. Now, one thing I could have mentioned is we could have also added sugar. Because of the fruit I added, I'm not going to worry about it. But instead of, or in addition to the fruit, you could do a few tablespoons of sugar, 2 or 3 or so, and that's going to, like I said, also help feed the bacteria. So if nothing else, just adding some sugar, it's not necessarily going to make a sweeter kimchi in the end because of the fermentation. It's going to get eaten by the bacteria, depending on how long you go. Somewhat or nearly completely, and so it's up to you. But if you have a short ferment of just a few days and you've added quite a bit of sugar, then you should expect a pretty sweet kimchi, which for some people would be just great. That's really a personal taste right there. So you can see just how nice and smooth that is. We're just going to go ahead and pour it right on top of the radishes and evenly massage it. Last but not least, before I mix all that up, I'm going to cut up my green onion. Got about 5 stalks here, into about 1/2-inch slices. The exact length is up to you, but just short enough that you get it in your mouth. It's not going to be annoying. I tend to do my whites a little bit shorter, just so you're not getting a big mouthful of onion. But otherwise, I'm going to get going to the about 1/2-inch slices in just a moment here. So there you have it. You can see here what I'm going to be working with. Looks really good. The lighting here is a little weird and making things look dark, but it looks really good and just bright in person. And you could do this with your hands. I'm going to just use this little spatula just to keep things a little neater. Make sure everything gets good and evenly coated. Now, as you can see, I mean, it's really evenly coated. It's a nice paste. It's a really good texture. I've tasted it. It tastes good. It's always good to taste things along the way. Taste your garlic raw, even if it tastes really bitter and nasty or something else isn't good. It shouldn't go in here. So some people say, oh, the flavor came out really not good. And so definitely tasting things. Even you can try one of these as they are. I already did, but I'm going to sneak another one. Sneak a snack. It's so crunchy. Being right out of the garden like that. But at the grocery store, they're usually really good texture to begin with. Real crunchy and firm. They really hold up well. Anything in the brassica family really ages. I mean, it holds up well in storage and in cold storage. So you could hang on to your radishes for a while and they'll still be in good shape. Once you salt them, though, you want to just by the next day be getting this together, if humanly possible, or within a few hours is fine too. After salting those cubed radishes. Now the only step we've got left here is to transfer to the jar. Clearly this is not going to fit into a quart jar, so I'm going to grab one of my 1/2-gallon jars and see how that looks. I've rinsed my jar out with some hot soapy water and rinse that out. And you get yourself a canning funnel, something like this, to put on top. This will make your life a little easier getting that in there. I'm going to just do this part by hand. That's how I always do it. It's really filling up now. We're going to press it down to some extent, but I don't want to mash it and soften things up either. So might have a bit extra, which is really fun to just eat unfermented, or just keep it in your fridge for a few hours and then have it. Honestly, it looks like it's going to be a totally perfect fit now that I've just pressed down on it a little bit. It's just right. So 3 pounds for a 1/2 gallon. Really good fit. I think I usually use about 2.5 or 2 3/4, which is good too, but this worked out just fine. It's got a little bit left paste left at the bottom of that jar. I'm going to finish that off. Don't want to waste any of this. It's too good to waste. Just going to finish it up here with a spoon. Get everything kind of right at the shoulder of that jar. That's perfect. I'm going to clean up this part too. I don't like to leave that on there because it definitely could develop some mold or something unwanted. Yeah, finishing step I always make is just cleaning around the rim of the jar. I like to get it really spick and span there so that there's no food at all except for in the jar altogether. No little splatter bits anywhere else. Get it real nice and clean. Take a look at that. Beautiful. Just perfect. I'm going to put on the regular metal lid, not a fermentation lid, because I don't want the gases to escape. I want them to build up and to kind of fizzinate and carbonate this bad boy, because I love fizzy kimchi. That green right there is a green onion. And that'll look kind of weird, didn't it? Okay, get that on there. Excuse my very unbeautiful fingers. We're going to get that nice and tight. Normally we're saying, oh, leave it a little loose, let the gases escape. But not in this case. We're just going to burp it. You know, that motion, it's going to let that gas out. I'm going to wait and show you that and show you the final product before we get to the end of this video. So I'm going to come back and show you the burping in a few days when this starts to carbonate, and then I'll eat this in about 5 days. I'll show you that at that point. Stay tuned. All right, well, this is trying it out day. I think it's about 6 or 7 days since we started. Open it up here. Hear that hiss a little bit. When I did this yesterday in my house, my family was not happy. I was loving it. Alright, that's going to be nice and fizzy. Let's give it a try. Absolutely delicious, full of flavor, effervescent. Pretty garlicky still, but it's milded down some since we started fermenting it. It was definitely on the more pungent side of garlic, and I used almost a whole head of it, or a whole head of it, so, but I really like it. Nice sweet flavor from those juices. The sugar is still in there a little bit. I love it. Enjoy, y'all.